Good morning and thank you for joining us on Africa This Morning. It is the 20th of February 2014. My name is Beryl Ooro. Let's start the day with a look at the headlines.
As long as you travel safe and are kind of smart about the decisions that you're making, a lot of times the people are a lot nicer than the media makes them out to be.
Egypt tourism threat. Egyptian Prime Minister Hazem Beblawi says militants in the Sinai Peninsula are a growing threat to foreigners. Devolution politics in Kenya. High Court stops Senate from summoning 9 governors.
Residents in Bangi took cover from gunfire as anti-Balaka youth charged the streets, burning tires in protest at a presidential statement encouraging Muslims who had fled the fighting in the Central African Republic to return. Central African Republic's interim president Catherine Samba-Panza conceded that she was not able to guarantee the security of Muslims in her country, but said she hoped they would one day return.
Members of the anti-Balaka established after Seleka fighters took over the country last March were seen mocking French and African Union peacekeeping troops in Bangi after setting fire to tires in the street. Gunfire was heard echoing through the streets as local residents were seen making for empty houses to take cover. The neighborhood of the capital quietened after peacekeepers cleared the road and a French helicopter was seen circling overhead. The former French colony has been gripped by chaos since Seleka, a loose coalition of northern rebels mixed with foreign mercenaries, launched an uprising in late 2012. Almost 1 million people, or a quarter of the population, have been displaced by fighting in the country. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon has pleaded for more swift, robust international help to stop sectarian violence that could turn into genocide. Paris announced last week an extra 400 troops would be sent, and the French mission would last longer than the expected 6-month time frame given when it launched in December. Experts say the origin of the crisis lies as much in the battle of control over resources in one of Africa's weakest governed states, split along ethnic fault lines and worsened by foreign meddling.
Egyptian Prime Minister Hazem Beblawi has said militants in the Sinai Peninsula are becoming a threat to foreign tourists. Officials say they are taking seriously a reported ultimatum by militant group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis for tourists to leave the country.
A militant group has warned tourists to leave Egypt and threatened to attack anyone who stays after tomorrow, raising the prospect of a new front in the fast-growing insurgency in the biggest Arab nation. The Sinai-based Ansar Beit al-Maqdis group, which claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing that killed 2 South Korean tourists and an Egyptian on Sunday, made the statement on an affiliated Twitter account. Ansar Beit al-Maqdis has said it does not want to post statements on social media sites, but statements that appeared on the Twitter account in the past have afterwards surfaced on websites which the group says it does use. Militants have killed hundreds of policemen and soldiers since the army deposed Islamist leader Mohamed Morsi 7 months ago. But Sunday's attack on a tourist bus marks a tactical shift to soft targets that could devastate an economy already reeling from political turmoil. State television quoted Prime Minister Hazem el-Badawi as saying Ansar was a threat to tourists. It aimed, he said, to degrade the roadmap to elections unveiled by the army when Morsi's fall provoked the bloodiest internal crisis in Egypt's modern history. Ansar said it was behind Sunday's suicide bombing near the resort of Taba, which revived memories of an insurgency in the 1990s, including a 1997 bloodbath of Luxor, when 58 tourists and 4 Egyptians were killed at a pharaoh's temple. On Monday, Germany's foreign minister changed his travel advice, telling travelers to be cautious about going to Egypt. It specifically discouraged travel to the Nile Delta outside the urban centers of Cairo and Alexandria, and to the Nile Valley south of Cairo to the north of Luxor. Egypt's Western Islands had hoped the uprising that toppled President Hosni Mubarak in 2011 would bring political and economic stability to a country at the heart of the Arab world. Instead, turmoil has gripped the nation of 85 million, which has a strategic peace treaty with Israel and controls the Suez Canal, a vital global shipping lane. In another sign of instability, an explosion wounded 4 Egyptian soldiers in the Sinai on Tuesday. Tourism was a major employer and accounted for more than 10% of gross domestic product before the revolt. Visitors are again sharply down since the army chief Fattah al-Sisi deposed Morsi, Mubarak's successor.
Rebel forces took control of parts of the capital of South Sudan's oil-producing Upper Nile state, as the United Nations said at least 10 people died following the latest outbreak in violence in the world's newest nation. This is the first major clash since the government and rebels signed a ceasefire agreement in January.
At least 10 people died at a UN hospital in Malakal from injuries sustained during intercommunal violence within and around the UN compound in the Upper Nile state. Both sides have accused each other of starting the violence in Malakal, the capital of the Upper Nile state. The government says there has been fighting in most parts of the town. The clashes will again fuel concerns over the security of oil fields in the north, the backbone of the economy. Thousands of people have been killed and more than 800,000 displaced by the violence since mid-December, when a fight broke out among the presidential guards in the capital Juba, before spreading out across the country.
The General National Congress President Noura Abu Sahmain from Libya says the parliament would not hand over power immediately as demanded by 2 militia groups and would defend its legitimacy with the army if necessary. A heavily armed militia group has threatened to remove the transitional parliament from power.
The president of the Libyan General National Congress, the body that oversees the country's parliament, condemned threats against the institution from 2 heavily armed Libyan militia groups that have demanded it hand over power immediately. Tuesday's deadline of 5 hours from a statement issued by the Al-Sawaki and the Al-Kwakwa militia brigades passed without incident, but they said that they had troops on standby to force the hand of the General National Congress. Libyan GNC President Nouri Abdul Samain said that the coup demands by the militia would be rejected.
In
the General National Congress statement regarding the threat that its legitimacy is exposed to, the GNC is responding in this news conference to the threats from the leadership of the 1st Brigade of Border Guards, known as the Al-Qaeda Brigade, that they are about to stage a coup against the legitimacy conferred by the Libyan people.
There was no sign of unrest last night in Tripoli, but dozens of vehicles armed with anti-aircraft guns from the Al-Kwakwa militia were parked at the roundabout near the GNC building. A commander said the militia had been preparing to move to the assembly to arrest deputies but extended their deadline by 2 days after talks mediated by the United Nations.
The
GNC aggressively condemns and rejects absolutely these attempts and considers them a coup against the legitimate institution of the state and against the choices of the Libyan people.
UN Libya envoy Tariq Kimitri met them as part of an effort to urge all parties not to use violence. In another show, force Samelka's troops had earlier travelled in armoured cars along Tripoli's airport road. In a separate protest underscoring the brutality of the OPEC country, security guards forced Benghazi airport in the east to close for 6 hours to back demands for salary payment.
United States Secretary of State John Kerry made a brief and announced trip to Tunisia on Tuesday to back the transition to democracy in the North African country that spawned the Arab Spring. His visit came amid troubled relations between the United States and longtime ally Egypt over the military overthrow of the government elected in 2011.
Tunisia's agreement earlier on this year on a consensus government and a new constitution, 3 years after the host of Ben Ali, has been hailed as a model by Western governments. Kerry met President Monsef Marzouk and caretaker Prime Minister Mehdi Joma, who formed a cabinet of independence in January after a months-long political crisis. The crisis was ignited by the assassination of 2 secular politicians. He congratulated Tunisia on the adoption of a new constitution that has been widely hailed as the most progressive in the region, calling it a big step, and said he looked forward to elections planned for later this year. Washington's relations with Tunis contrast with those with Cairo, where Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi tilted squarely towards Moscow in a visit last week.
My hope is to be able to meet with General al-Sisi somewhere in the next days or weeks.
Washington has given $400 million in assistance to Tunis since 2011. Kerry left Tunis for Paris for a meeting Wednesday with Palestinian President Mohamed Abbas as the US seeks to arm out an agreed framework to guide negotiations with Israel towards a peace treaty.
I'm sure I will be back. I apologize. Thank you.
The Embobut forest evictees from the Sengwe community have come out strongly condemning the move by the government to evict them from their ancestral lands, saying their way of life has totally been destroyed. Through their representatives, the evicted community has vowed to claim their ancestral forest land.
Early this year, the Sengwer community that has been living in Embobut forest was evicted by the Kenya Forest Service Guards after a 21-day notice given by the government elapsed. The main reason for the eviction, according to the Kenyan government, was to conserve the Cherangani water tower.
I'll be moderating this conference.
Thousands were left homeless after their houses were burnt. Women and children were forced to live in makeshift houses along the road, leading to the forest under deplorable conditions. February, and the situation is still the same. The government is not turning back. The Sengwer people, on the other hand, have vowed to return to their ancestral land, the Embobut forest.
They should be left to live and protect their ancestral home. They are willing to be bound to use those home areas as conservators of the resources that are so precious to their livelihoods and to abide by conditions laid down by Kenya Forest Service.
So you read first, and he reads the rest, you just let him have the chair.
This is not the first time this marginalized community is being evicted from their ancestral land. In 2009, retired President Moi Kibaki's administration evicted them. The Sengwer community members claimed that there was no compensation to facilitate their movement from the forest.
The much hyped compensation of Kenya shillings 400,000 to each family returned for them to forget the forest is misleading. Many people do not get this, and many do not understand or agree to the proposed arrangement. In the spirit of transparency, the government should publish the list of all the beneficiaries.
Kenya's constitution establishes community ownership of ancestral lands. Under the constitution, the Sengwer people have firm rights to their ancestral land. Sengwer indigenous people's ancestral lands are in the Rift Valley province in western Kenya, in and around the Cherangani Hills, including the Embobut forest. Disposition and encroachment of the Sengwer's land took place under British colonial rule and has continued since independence.
The Kenyan High Court has temporarily stopped the Senate from summoning 9 governors over the management of county resources, pending the outcome of a case lodged by a lobby group. This comes a day after 9 governors snubbed the Senate Committee on Finance.
The battle for supremacy between county governors and senators is far from over. Yesterday, 9 of the 10 summoned by the Senate Finance Committee to answer queries raised by the Auditor General failed to turn up.
And I think we need to reiterate the same thing that we said last time, that the Council of Governors is a legal entity established in law in Section 19 of the Intergovernmental Relations Act. And they have specific functions that are lined up, set out in law, which among other things include dealing with issues of common interest to counties, capacity building of counties, and all the issues that are raised really in this report fall within their mandate. So for an entity that is set up in law, funded by the Treasury, which is required to report annually to the Senate under Article 22, Section 22 of the same law, they are required to report annually to the Senate and to the National Assembly. In fact, then it is mandatory that they appear if they are summoned to come and explain or to come and discuss the issues that have been raised.
Despite the issuing of legal summons to the governors to appear, the governors chose to take their fight to the courts, and they vowed not to honor the summons.
We should give the court opportunity to ventilate these issues They have also sought the opinion of CIC and so forth. Therefore, he requests that the Senate suspends the summoning pending the clarification. This is basically the letter from the chairman, in which he has argued at length on why he thinks the governors should not appear before the committees of the House.
Today, Justice Mumbi Ngugi ruled that the application by the International Legal Consultants Group raised valid concerns and has referred the matter to the Chief Justice, who is expected to appoint a bench to hear the matter. The group argues that officers in counties are accountable to the County Assembly for financial management, and the Senate would be abusing that power by purporting to summon the governors. The lobby group wants the Senate Standing Committee on Economic and Finance barred from summoning governors from Bungoma, Bomet, Kiambu, Kitui, Kisumu, Narok, Nakuru, Tana River and Wajir counties over financial management. The lobby group's lawyer, Peter Wanyama, argues that the summons contravene Article 226(2) of the Kenyan Constitution, which provides that an accounting officer of a national public entity is accountable to the National Assembly for its financial management. The Council of Governors has also moved to court to suspend the impeachment of Embu Governor Martin Nyaga Wambora. Another case at the Supreme Court is seeking an opinion on whether the Senate has powers to summon the governors.
After the devolution of health services in Kenya, the Ministry of Health has launched policy guidelines to facilitate the decentralization of critical services like immunization. The policy outlines key standards to be observed at all levels of immunization service provision.
Under the Kenyan Constitution, disease prevention services such as immunizations will be under county health management teams, hence the need to guide health workers on vaccination priorities and acceptable standards. The policy document launched today spells out the rules to be followed to ensure that vaccines are provided safely at the very local level.
We want to start implementing immunization services at the county without a proper document which guides us on what to do at various levels. Yeah. So the document basically entails what are immunizable diseases, how we are supposed to immunize, who is supposed to immunize, what time we are supposed to give those immunization, how we are supposed to take care of vaccines. As you know, vaccines are very delicate. They are stored at a very special temperatures. Yeah, we have also outlined the capacity building of health workers. What do they need to be trained on before they start administering vaccines?
The Universal Childhood Immunization, commissioned in 1974, has reduced or eliminated many infectious diseases that once routinely killed or harmed many infants, children and adults. Launching the policy document, Cabinet Secretary for Health James Macharia said that improving routine immunization was essential for elimination of diseases.
If you are to have development, if you are to save lives, we really have to have an effective policy. From Kidurai to Cap.
He urged stakeholders to join government efforts in improving immunization coverage.
I'd like to urge that in future, when we have this kind of interventions, we make sure that not only do we look at the geographic coverage, but also demographic coverage as well. Because indeed, some of those immunizations not only be for children, for polio, but some others will go in adults as well.
Pamela Ocheng from the Ministry of Health said for the program to have the same effect in all the counties, county health officials need to be trained.
With the devolved system, again, our work at national level is the policy direction. So this policy is ensuring the consistency so that what is being done in Lamu should be the same as what is being done in Nairobi, should be the same as what is being done in Nakuru County. So we are ensuring or empowering them with the right knowledge and skill standards to adhere to. Then, with the devolved system, we will only strengthen them and keep policy and make sure they adhere to standards, but we will not directly manage them, but we empower them.
Immunization is one of the proven cost-effective and successful public health interventions. For Ebru African News, I'm Miriam Kanyugo.
And on that health note, we come to the end of the bulletin here on Africa This Morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Coming up shortly is a look at the leading stories on the social media platform with Cheryl Kenei.